Have you people done that? Okay. Now today I'm going to start with a new module, which is nothing but Spring Security. Okay. Fine. So this module, it is basically used to take care of security in order to secure the applications. We use this module. Here the module basically deals with authentication and authorization. This module deals with authentication and authorization. So authentication, validating the user, checking the user credentials, whereas authorization, checking the privileges of the user, whether the user has got the rights to access or has the privilege to access a particular resource. That's it. Okay, fine. Now, let's see. First of all, I'm going to demonstrate with an example, then we'll discuss about it in detail. Okay, first I would like to show you people an example. Here, let's say I got an application, a web application, let's say. Here, I got certain resources. Okay. So, when I say resources, especially when it comes to web applications here, what do I mean by resources? You see, here, resources means can be any object. If it is web applications, it can be a static resource or a dynamic resource as well. Okay. A HTML page or a component, a controller, it is a web application. Or generally any object. So these are all resources. Yeah. Now let's see how we can actually secure these resources. Again, we got both options, XML, and we have annotations as well. So first of all, I'll show you how to work with XML. So I'll just give you an example here of this. So you see, for suppose I got a web application this way, and you see I've got few folders here in web content. You see I got few JSPs. For suppose you see I got a folder with the name my home, and in this I got a JSP. Again there is another folder called secure, and this again we got a JSP and called as test JSP, and then we got extreme folder under the secure. Extreme is a subfolder under the secure here, which got a method again. So here, let's say I want my application to be secure. Okay, most of the pages here, I want the users to access them only if they are valid users, only if they are logged in. I will provide the access to this pages which you're looking at. Basically, we are trying to secure the web resources here, like JSPs and all. So, how do we start? What is the first thing we have to do here? You know, the first thing what you have to do is configure few details regarding the security. Here, if you are working with Spring Security, what you have to do is you have to configure this filter first of all. Okay, this is the filter which you have to configure. That is the first thing. So, now for configuring the security details, here, we'll use a separate configuration file and we'll load it, say here, this way, using if you got any additional configurations which you want to load, okay, then you can use this listener, context loader listener. This is a component which we can use to load additional configuration files, okay, in the Spring application, web application especially. I'm talking about web applications. And here, this context loader listener will read this context parameter with the name context config location. And this is the standard context parameter which we'll be using. This is actually the standard parameter with the name context config location. And you see here, we have configured the details about an XML file whose name is application security.xml. We got an XML file with the name application security.xml. So this two lines, this configuration here is used to load an XML file, a Spring Bean configuration file itself, whose name is application context security.xml. Please make a note of it. Not only here in Spring Security, but throughout your application, wherever you want to load some additional files, you can configure them here this way in the web.xml file using this listener called as context loader listener. Please make a note of it, all of you. Yes, please make a note of it. Okay. So which component is loading the configuration files here? Yes, which component is loading them? In this configuration file, so there is a Spring component which is responsible for loading additional configuration files. What is it? Context loader listener. This is the listener which is responsible for loading the additional configuration files. Here it is. Okay. Please remember, if someone asks you how to load additional configuration files in the web applications, then your answer should be context loader listener. What if you got multiple configuration files to load? If you want to load multiple configuration files, then what you're going to do this? If you want to load multiple configuration files, then place a comma here and then specify the other configuration file name. Just place a comma and you can add another configuration file name here. Okay, yes, and go on like that. So here and when we talk about this component, delegating filter proxy, see this delegating filter proxy is actually responsible for intercepting the requests, and it will forward them to the Spring Security module components so that they will process the request, will check for the authentication and authorization and all. Okay, I'll tell you. So this is the one configuration which you have to do here. Okay, yes. And then there is one more thing. What is it? Also, please make a note of this. Just a second. Yeah, sorry. So here, please also make a note of this. Even including the comments, I want you to make a note of it. Okay, to manage the HTTP sessions, basically we are going to use this. Okay, to manage the HTTP sessions, we'll be using it. Yeah. For the session management, especially concurrent sessions, to deal with concurrent sessions, we use it. Okay. Yes. Okay. So this is also one of the security components, Spring Security Module component called as HTTP Session Event Publisher. What do we mean by concurrent sessions? Concurrent sessions. Parallel sessions. So what will be the issue with this concurrent sessions? Okay, we'll discuss about it, don't worry. Okay, and you know what, here we have to, we need additional libraries for Spring Security. Okay, for Spring Security, you got separate set of libraries again which you have to add. Those dependencies, I'll let you know what are the dependencies which are needed for Spring Security. Okay, don't worry. Now, here, you know what, let's say I want, just a second. Yeah, here, let's say I want this index JSP to be accessed by only the valid users. The user should be a valid user. Okay, and you know, generally users again can be classified. How can we classify the users on what basis? General concept, you know, based on the roles. We can assign a role for set of users. Okay, so we can broadly classify the users again based on the roles. Let's say you may have a user whose role, let's say role user. That means these are general purpose users, let's say. Okay, so role user. And let's say I may have users called as admins, role admin. The role of the user is admin. Okay. Again, I may have a user, another user whose role is account, so something like that. So this way, you see, I can create different roles. You know, it's purely user defined. The role names and all are user defined. you see, as of now, I want to categorize the users into two types. Let's say role user and role admin. So if the user's role, okay, you see here, should I always use role user and do role admin only? No. So you can classify them according to your own will and wish. Okay, there is no restriction. The role need not be user always. The role need not be admin always. Okay. Yes, you may have multiple roles also, more than two. Okay. Yes, it depends. And let's say I'll broadly classify my users into two types, user and admin. Now, what is the need for the classification? What do people think? What is the need for the classification here? Why I should classify the roles? Yes, you see, we can set the privileges. Yes, access the limit to the applications. Yes, so security. Basically the privileges, I can say we can give some privileges here to the users. See if the okay, we can limit access to the application, as you people said. Okay, yes, we can confine the activities of the users. Okay, yes. See, for example, if the user is admin, let's say the user whose role is admin, that user has to be provided access to certain resources. Maybe the role is more privileged. Okay, let's say the role is more privileged compared to the role user. So here, if it is role user, let's say its role is little limited compared to the role admin. Say the role user will not have access privileged resources, or more secure resources. Let's say the role user will not have access to the secured resources in the application. Okay, yes, maybe the role is limited. So let's say user role whose is admin has got more privileges. Maybe the admin can access more secure pages compared to the user whose role is user. That's it. Okay, fine. Now here, let's say in my application, I got this index JSP which is under my home directory. See, under the my home directory, we got index JSP, and I want this index JSP to be accessed by the role user. Okay, I want the user to access index JSP. Just a second, please. You know what? Here, how do I configure the details? Do we need to write any code for that? Actually, you're using Spring Security. If you're not using Spring Security, then definitely you have to write the code. Definitely, you have to deal with it. But because we're using Spring Security here, what we can do is we don't need to worry about it. All you need to do is just use this HTTP element in the configuration file, okay, and then you can configure the details about that URL this way. You see, my home is a directory, right? So that means this pattern here, my home slash star star, it indicates that I can only, you see here, sorry, only the users, the pattern indicates that the resources under the my home, the pattern under the resources, the pattern indicates that the resources under the my home, okay, it refers to that my home resources. Who can access them? You see, the access is role user. That means we want the user whose role is role user to access the my home resources. That's it. And similarly, you see, we got another directory with the name secure, and you see this secure resources should only be accessed by the role the user whose role is role admin. But you might be wondering where are this user details configured and all, so we'll tell you, okay, don't worry. So later on we'll talk about it. So here you see, this way we can just secure the resources. You see, now the user whose role is role user can access the resources under my home, and the resources under the secure folder can be accessed by the user whose role is role admin. You see how simple it is. Now you may have a question, actually how this application will know which user is currently logged in. Actually, first of all, whether the user is logged in or not. That is the first question, right? Is the user logged in? If the user is logged in, what is the role? That's the question of that user. And what if the user is not logged in? And where are this user details? Okay, username, password, role, where are they configured? Basically Spring Security will follow, or will be using two tables for them. We have to create those tables in our database to store these details. Okay. To store these details, we have to create two tables. Okay. Just give me 1 minute, please. I'm sorry. Just a minute. I'm sorry. So now basically Spring uses two standard tables where these details will be stored. Okay, one table is users table. I'll show you. Basically, in the specification, it will be the details about the tables will be provided, which we have to create. But is it mandatory that always I have to use these tables? No. Okay, but by default, these are the standard tables which are used by the Spring Security. If you want to modify them, you want to use your own tables also, you can do that. But later I'll tell you how to do that. So now you see the table by default, here the Spring will search for the user's details in this for the user details in this users table. Users. You see the column names are username, password, enable. Okay. So here you see the password. The password is in the encoded format here. Okay. It is encoded. Okay. Using hashing algorithms. I'll tell you. Now, okay, only we in this table we are looking at the details like admin, password, and then enabled or not. But what if where are this role details? The role details, the user roles are actually defined in the in another table. Okay, and the table is authorities. And how they are mapped based on the username. You see the username will be common here in these two tables. Based on the username, the roles are mapped here. You see the column names are username and authority. In the authority column, you'll define the roles. Role admin and role user. So how we are setting the privileges here? We don't set the privileges in the database. You see, all we need to do is the way we configure them. It won't work. Simple. So you have to create them. So if you want to create your own tables, then you have to customize this code and all. Okay, so that is different story again. We'll look into it later. Yes, otherwise from where you'll get these details, usernames and passwords and all. There should be some source to store these details, right? So without configuring them, why you won't? Generally, that is where we store the details, right? So we need some source to store this usernames, passwords, and all the credentials. We are storing them in the database. So now here we have configured the details, right? The rest of the stuff is commented here. Don't worry about it. Now you see just these two elements are enabled. Now here, what if okay, I said the details are stored in the tables, right? Okay, users and authorities, and by default it will search. The Spring Security module is designed such a way that it can fetch the data from this users and authorities tables and they use that information to validate the user as well as authorize the user. Okay, for both validations and authorizations, authentication. Validation means authenticating the user, checking whether the supplied user details supplied by the user, whether they are genuine or not, all such things. Validation, we call it as authentication. Authentication and authorization will be done by the Spring Security with the help of those details itself, which are stored in the database. But how the Spring framework will know with which database it is supposed to interact, where exactly? Okay, tables are standardized. So all it needs to know is where these tables are, in which database server, we have created these tables. Okay, where to look up for search for these tables, in which database it is supposed to search for this tables. That is the database configuration details which we have to supply. You see, you will do this. Okay, you know there is a standard bean to configure the database details, and we are using it again here. Driver manager data source. We have already used it in Spring JDBC. We used it in Spring ORM, Spring and Hibernate integration, right? Yes, and this is the third place, okay, where we generally use it to configure database details, okay? Yes. And then, you know what, here, you'll find that in Spring Security, okay, you got something called as authentication provider, the component which will hold these details. Like the Spring Security will read the details from the authentication provider itself. So way to search for this details, okay, so the user details, the user credentials, where it has to search for those details, it will be provided by the authentication provider. Here you see in the authentication provider itself will configure the details. First of all, you know what, here our passwords are encoded. If you people notice this table, you'll find that the passwords are encoded. Basically for that, MD5 hashing algorithm is used. MD5 hashing algorithm is used. So you see, you have to provide the details about that also to the Spring framework. You see what I'm doing? I'm using an element called as password encoder, and you see you got an attribute called as hash, which is used to specify which hashing algorithm we are using to encode the passwords. Okay, what is the advantage of encoding the passwords and storing them in the database this way? What do people think? I'll show you how to encode them also. Is there any advantage? Yeah, you see, the passwords are not readable. You see, if someone reads this password, it's not easy for them to read and also remember it, right? Quickly, they can't remember them. So, the password is encoded now. It's not plain text. So, if it is plain text, okay, quickly, you know, in a glance, we can understand the password, right? Okay, we can read the password and remember it easily. But even though if someone looks at it, you see, it is not that readable. They have to, it will take some time. Okay, reading this encoded password will be difficult for anyone. Until and unless that person is a supercomputer, his brain is supercomputer. Okay, so it will be a little difficult. Fine, that is the advantage. But how to encode these passwords and all, I'll tell you, don't worry. So you see that a password is encoded using MD5 algorithm. So the details are provided here. Next, you see, we are asking the framework to use the data source. That means to use the details which are configured in this data source object to interact with the database. You see JDBC user service. So this element is used to supply the data source object reference so that the framework will use it accordingly to interact with the database. Framework will use it accordingly to interact with the database. Okay. So this way we'll supply the details. So now Spring will use these details to fetch the user credentials and accordingly validate the user and authorize the user. Now the question of hash encoding the passwords, you'll find that, just a second. Yeah, so you'll find that in online you'll find a lot of sites where hashing can be done. So I've used, there are generators. Okay, if you supply the password, probably it will return, say, generate MD5 hashing, generate MD5 hash for a particular word. Let's say hello 123. Click on generate MD5 hash. Where is it? I think there is some problem here. We'll use some other site. Three. You see, you got the hashing algorithm for it. Okay. So this way we can generate a hash value for that, encode the passwords, store them in the database. Later on, the Spring framework, you see what it does? It will read this password. Okay, because we have configured that the password encoder, we have used this password encoder element to supply the hashing algorithm which we have used. So what happens here? The Spring framework now will read that password. It understands that it is encoded using MD5 hashing algorithm. So it will try to again convert it back into text format. And then it will validate the user accordingly. Okay, using that information. Fine. Here, what about the login? Making the user to log in. The user is not logged in. All such things. You know what? You'll find that Spring Security Framework has got that feature also. You see, if the user is not logged in, it will prompt the user to log in. What if there is no login page in our application? Spring Framework can generate a login page dynamically. But if you want, we can also supply our own login page. Okay, yes. If you want, we can supply our own login page. Okay, as of now, in this case, we are not doing it. We're just allowing the framework itself to create the login page. I'll show you later on how to create our own login page and configure it. Okay, yes. Fine. Now we saw these details, right? Just let's do one thing. Here we'll try to run this application and test it. This is a home page. Click on secure page. You see, it is asking you to, it is prompting you to log in. So because we didn't log in, here it is asking us to log in first. So I'll copy this code. Okay, click on secure page. Fine. Now we got the credentials, right? Admin, the password is admin123. Admin, submit. Access is denied. You know, here, if you keenly observe the address bar, basically by clicking on the secure link, I was trying to access the page index.jsp, but actually the credentials which I have provided are admin credentials, right? So basically the role admin is not supposed to access this page. We have configured the index, we have configured role user to access this page. Okay, only role user, users whose role is user, they can access this page, right? It says access is denied. Okay, fine. We'll change it. We got another user here called as Harry. This user's role is user actually. Okay, you can check this here, you see. Harry's role is role user and admin's role is role admin here. Okay, yes. Now, this time, login with the details. Harry, 1, 2, 3. Okay, submit. Now you see, this time you got the details. Here, in this page, it is displaying the credentials. Now, you're able to access this page. Fine. We can log out. Yes. I think this requested resources is not accessible. Just a second. Just a second. Okay. Okay, now we have logged out. Let me just reload this and again. So you see at that login page which we got over there, it is dynamically generated. That login page was dynamically generated. Okay, so now let me just type in these details. Look, and have you noticed it actually by, okay, just a second. See this URL, secure page URL. So it is referring to which JSP. Down you can see that link it is displaying. If I place a cursor, it is referring to which page? Yes, it is referring to which page? My home index JSP. Have you people noticed it? Actually, if I click on it, what is happening? First of all, the framework is checking whether the user is logged in or not. So user is not logged in. So you see it will display the login page. And you see now here I'll just supply the credentials. And after I supply the credentials, if I click on submit, so what the application is doing, this framework now in security module, it will first validate that user. After the user is validated successfully, after the user is validated successfully, you'll find that it will forward this request to the to that JSP itself. Will forward the request to that JSP itself. Okay, to my home JSP. Yes, it is capable of that. Okay, I'll click on submit query. So you got my home index JSP. So let's see this is what the content is or not. What is there in my home index JSP? Yes, this is the content in my home index JSP. Secure index page. And we got a logout link here. That's it. I'll tell you about logout later on. So now here the credentials will be stored, okay, for this user. You can log out the session. Till that time, the user credentials will be stored by the application, okay. And this is regarding the web resources. Accessing the web resources is how it works. Now, what if user action on the application side? Okay, when user is trying to place any request, which is going to invoke the methods here. The user actions, you see, may invoke a method here. You see, here on the application side, you got a method called as withdraw, let's say, and with this method, I want only those users whose role is supervisor to invoke this method, not everyone. Not everyone. Only the user whose role is supervisor should be able to invoke this method. That means, though the user may not directly invoke it, probably, the user may perform on, wants to withdraw the amount from the application, through the application, you see, through a web page, maybe the user will click on withdraw. So the user, whose role is supervisor, only that user will be allowed to access this method. Okay, other users will not be able to do that. So this way we can secure the method calls also. I'll show you this one also, how to work with it. Yes. So what we have to, do is try to understand these configurations, okay, and how to secure the web resources, secure the method calls, okay, and how to add our own custom login page. As of now, it is dynamically generating a login page. So how to customize it, okay, yes. So the tables part, I'll explain it. If you want to add user tables, okay, so how to add them. So such details which we have to discuss here. And what are the components, okay, which are involved, and how to handle this concurrent sessions. Those things we'll discuss it in the next class. Okay, first I'll show you the Spring project, how to create it, how to add the Maven dependencies for the Spring security. Okay, so from there we'll start. Okay, so we got an existing application like or else we try to create a new one, whichever is possible. Okay, yes, fine. So I'll stop it here. So we'll meet tomorrow again at the same time.